The doctor is in.
Next on AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show. Here's Brian O'Neill.
So glad to have him with us. Dr. Robert A. Heineman, Alfred University political science professor emeritus.
Pleased to be here, Brian. Yes, indeed.
All righty, Doc. Well, I want to get to a lot of Mueller stuff, but, Nancy Pelosi's saying no to Congressman Jerry Nadler on impeachment. What do you make of that?
Well, I think I don't quite know what to make of Nadler, I must say. I mean, the man clearly is on a mission here, and I just don't know. Maybe this goes way back into New York City politics of some sort, and his relationship with Trump way back when. Who knows? But he really is after Trump.
He's acting like Trump is at Tammany Hall there, and
and clearly Trump is far removed from anything like Tammany Hall. The personal animus there is, frankly, getting in the way of a lot of other pretty important things. And I think it's beginning to bother Nancy Pelosi a little bit, obviously. She has to try to hold together a majority, and she's got a pretty substantial majority right now in the House of Representatives. But with Nadler, and of course you've got these fringe types who have been wanting to impeach Trump all along from the very beginning. So they're not going to be satisfied no matter what happens. But as one person mentioned Wednesday night, I think, probably one of the happiest people the whole situation, in addition to Trump, was Nancy Pelosi, because really this whole Mueller testimony seems to have turned out to be a real flop for the anti-Trump people. And to give Mueller credit, I mean, he pretty much clearly told him several weeks ago that he really didn't have much more to say. This was it. So what's going on there? It's just kind of hard to fathom. I suppose it'll all come out here years from now. But I do think this discussion of can President Trump be prosecuted after he leaves office? Well,
they made a big point of that over and over.
Yeah, and what are you going to prosecute him for? I mean, I think you need a crime here somewhere. And somebody was talking about, maybe some kind of campaign finance violation. Well, first of all, you can't prosecute the president for crimes, so-called crimes. These are decisions, let's put it this way, for decisions he's made as president. That's very clear. Now, if he's actually engaged in criminal activity as a president, that might be another story. That's not all that clear. So if you're going to be prosecuting him, you're probably going to be prosecuting him for something that occurred before he was president. Now you run into other things like the statute of limitations and the whole issue of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. I mean, the whole thing is ridiculous. Unless
what the left is arguing, what I've heard them argue when they talk about prosecuting him after the White House, when you talk about campaign finance, they usually try to tie the payments to Stormy Daniels there.
Yes. I think the payments to Stormy Daniels, is nothing illegal about that as far as I can see. By the way, Stormy sort of disappeared, hasn't she? We
haven't heard much about her lately.
How unfortunate. In any case, that in itself is not illegal. I think what the claim is that it wasn't reported as a campaign expense, and Trump may not have seen it as a campaign expense, to be fair to him, and we still have to come up with who actually made the payments and all kinds of other issues in there that.
Well, I think the feds announced that they dropped that.
Yeah.
That quietly made the news a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, the Justice Department, yeah. So all this does kind of show, I think, really how impotent the House of Representatives, the majority, is at this point. I mean, here they are out there holding Barr and who else was it in contempt? Where's that going? I don't think anywhere. So it would be useful, Brian, if the leaders in the House of Representatives would get together and perhaps improve the roads and bridges and such in America. That would be something.
Yes, and Trump has
useful.
made statements about that, about the lack of attention from Democrats to those issues.
Right. And the whole thing about prescription drugs and trying to hold the prices down on prescription drugs. And again, you begin to see a little movement in that area. But
your friend Joe Zempolinsky made a statement, and he said it very succinctly. He said, hey, President Trump won fair and square. Let's get back to the business of the American people.
Yes. And so there, again, you got the whole border situation. There are all kinds of issues that need to be dealt with. I do believe, though, on the verge of passing budget resolutions and dealing with national ceiling for the national debt. I think some of the Republicans in the House will probably vote against it, outraged that the national debt is going to become even greater, etc. Well, that's fine. Go ahead. That's what you want to vote against. But what was interesting, I think, it appears to me that they've put together a 2-year deal. And that's something many, many years ago when I was in the Office of Management and Budget working for the president, I recommended that we move to 2-year deals in this kind of situation as opposed to single-year appropriations and such.
Did they pay attention at the time?
No, that's long gone. But the point is...
And which president was that?
Yeah, please. It was sometime between Washington and Jefferson, I think. Yeah. In any case, that makes sense. And I don't know why we even have this limit on the national debt, because they're going to raise it regardless. Nobody's going to put the United States in bankruptcy. So get rid of that limit. And let's just keep moving along, and you just control the thing year by year, and in terms of spending, etc. So I think they may be a little advanced there, but again, I haven't seen the whole thing, so I'm not quite sure where it's going to end up.
Can I make an observation?
Well, you always do. Yeah.
Well, President Trump's critics will frequently say that he's a narcissist.
Yes.
But it would seem that his opponents are obsessed with him.
Yes, so your point is he's
well,
not...
Well, maybe he is a narcissist, but they're obsessed with this particular narcissist.
I agree. So he's not only a narcissist...
So everyone's thinking
everybody else is looking in the pond at his reflection. Yeah. No, it's pretty incredible.
It's a strange situation.
Yep. Yeah, it's getting a little, bizarre.
I mean, I thought they were kind of hyper-focused on Bill Clinton sometimes, but there's no comparison.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Certainly, there were a lot of Republicans out there going after Clinton, and there was plenty to go after. There's no question about that. But that's nothing compared to the hatred and venom you're getting. You're getting real venom here with Trump, which I think in a way kind of encourages. I don't think it's wrong to say that. I mean, Clinton's whole approach was to try to smooth everything out and keep everybody kind of talking, whereas Trump just, kind of keeps poking them in the eye, and naturally that's going to lead to more.
It kind of eggs them on.
Yeah. So, in any case, I do think that we're probably done with the Mueller report. I don't think anybody else.
Before we talk about the trade war with China and Boris Johnson, can we quickly talk about Congressman Tom Reed's trip to Texas?
Well, sure. How'd that turn out?
Very interesting. Jonathan Mark on his show yesterday played lengthy sound bites from Reid's press call from Wednesday, which was the first time that Reid talked about the trip publicly since he returned. He went Friday. I think he got back either late Friday or sometime Saturday back to the U.S.
Yeah, back to the U.S.? He went across the border?
Excuse me, back from Texas.
Oh, okay.
He was at the border.
Yes,
my
yes.
mistake.
Texas
but you know,
is still part
we
of
got
the
some
United-
interesting things out of that.
Well, share it with us.
He saw. He said he saw a lot of weapons. He said he saw a lot of drugs. He said he saw human trafficking, and he talked about a case that kind of dispels a lot of the criticisms of the ICE agents. You hear a lot of people on the left hollering and screaming at ICE agents for separating babies. And Reid told a story of the ICE agents, and Reid said he saw this himself. Reid said that a man came in and appeared to be a father with a little baby. And the ICE agent said, if we're going to do a DNA test real quick here, and if this is not your baby, you're going to be facing federal charges. So the guy pretty much admitted, Reid said right there on the spot, that the baby was not his, that the baby was given to him because he was told by smugglers that's the best way to get in.
Right.
Well, that kind of contradicts a story that you hear that the ICE agents are out to divide families.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure that a lot of these stories are way off the mark. Try to create as much emotional unhappiness as possible. And a lot of it, frankly, you have to say to yourself, well, what do you want me to do about it? These guys are in here illegally. They know they're here illegally, and they're unhappy. Well, we're going to make them happy now? I mean, they're unhealthy. Well,
Reid said from where he was standing, you could see, and the Border Patrol agents pointed this out to him, where the drug cartels were, and that they were pointing out to the illegals coming in where to go in so as to divide up the border agents' numbers so that the border agents were less effective and so that the illegals could get smuggled in more easily.
Yeah. Well,
he had a lot of very interesting telling stories.
Well, it's good our man is out there on the scene, keeping track. I think Schumer must have gone with them too then, right? Because Trump
I don't know if they were together.
Oh.
I didn't see Schumer in the picture of Reid when I saw the picture at CBS down in Texas.
Yeah, but Trump has said he wants to meet with Schumer and get his feedback here on what he saw at the border.
Schumer said what he saw, that the conditions for the immigrants at the border detention center were terrible. That's what Schumer stressed.
Yeah, well, Trump wants to talk to him about that. I don't know whether he'll talk to him or not, but
trade war with China.
Yes. And it's Trump's tariffs and embargoes and such seem to be having a pretty hefty effect upon the Chinese. And I think I saw something the other day that Chinese investment on an annual basis have dropped 90% in the United States. And I think, again, China's economic growth has dropped pretty dramatic. Nothing that dramatic by any means, but still you can see that their industry and economic activity is definitely being affected pretty badly. I believe today, Brian, the new GDP numbers come out for the United States, and I would expect them to be pretty healthy. Gross domestic product, again, as you know, Brian,
yes,
is a total of all the values and services, and the total value of all the services and products produced in the United States in a year. So this comes out on a quarterly basis, and of course it's a huge number in this country. So we'll see, but I would bet we're still buzzing along at a pretty good pace. I think the part of that to watch, first of all, a big chunk of that is government services and payments, but the thing I would watch really closely is manufacturing, and if the manufacturing component is moving along at a reasonable rate. That's been kind of in the doldrums. So, in any case, the trade efforts by Trump seem to be having some effect. Now, the real problem I think there is, working with the Chinese, is you're putting them in a real bind you got to give him a way to save face here.
Is Trump putting so much pressure with these U.S. companies pulling out of China? Do you see that as a bad thing?
Well, I think it's hurting the Chinese, a lot.
You say we want to let the Chinese save face. Why?
Well, we're talking about an Asian country here that doesn't want to appear that it's been brought to its knees, etc.
Do we need them for North Korea negotiations?
Well, that would be helpful, but we just like to have negotiations where the trade between the countries get back on a halfway normal basis. But you've got to let them, give them something to allow them, and that's where I think you run into problems with Trump, because he, I think, has a real tendency to go out and start bragging about how we're pounding the Chinese left and right, and that's not terribly helpful, that's for sure. I mean, I don't mind pounding them left and right, don't get me wrong there, but you can't just go rubbing their faces in it.
We're talking with Dr. Robert Heineman, Alfred University political science professor emeritus. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk Boris Johnson. Stay with us.
McCourt's Auto Collision on State Route 36 just south of Canastillo is a full-service collision shop offering not just collision work but also paint work. McCourt's has a 24-foot frame straightener with 3-dimensional measurement. McCourt's accepts all insurance companies and can work with you on any deductible you may have. At McCourt's, they work for your interest and your benefit, not the insurance companies. All work is fully warranted and they offer a free loaner car. McCourt's Auto Collision, State Route 36 in Canastillo, where customer satisfaction is always number one. Phone 607-698-9900.
Back with Dr. Robert A. Heineman, political science professor emeritus. Boris Johnson, big win there. I was talking to a relative of mine who's from Ireland, who lives in England, and
yes.
Well, it's very interesting to see the Liberals, she says, are very, very unhappy this week.
Yes.
With the way that things turned out with the prime minister's election.
Right.
Boris Johnson get elected. The impression I get is that it's the Liberals over there dislike Trump, and they think that Boris Johnson is Trump-like.
Well, I think, are you talking about the Liberals or Labor? Because I think it's Labor that's obviously pretty unhappy. You do have some Liberals running around there, but... Boris Johnson gives really new energy to this whole Brexit effort. Obviously, Theresa May put everything she had into it, but her approach and I think Boris Johnson's approach are going to be quite a bit different. And you got to have a lot of sympathy for Theresa May. And I got to say, I think she's still pretty popular, frankly, in England. But she just could not work a compromise with the Europeans. And nor could she put together a workable majority in Parliament. And the problem is, and I don't know how Boris Johnson is going to work with this, even though he had the Conservatives with their coalition there have a bare majority in the House of Commons. One group wants even more immediate and drastic break with the European community. Others want particular exceptions. I mean, you get the thing divided up in probably 4 or 5 different directions, and it's just harder than the dickens to get all these guys to agree on one particular point. And I'm not certain. Johnson's view is that whether they agree or not, by I think October 31st or something, they're pulling out, period. And I'm not certain he can do that either without a majority. But the guy is obviously bringing a lot more energy into the effort, and who knows, maybe he's got some moves here that'll bring together reasonable majorities. And maybe the Europeans will become a little more flexible in this situation. I don't know, but clearly his position is that the British have voted to withdraw from the European community, and they're going to do it.
Yeah, if I could say something on that, reading from the Guardian, the UK Guardian, the EU in Brussels has roundly rebuffed Boris Johnson, after Boris Johnson laid down tough conditions for a new Brexit deal that he wants. Johnson says he would prefer to leave the EU with a deal, and certain things need to be clear. The withdrawal agreement negotiated by his predecessor has been 3 times rejected, and its terms are unacceptable to the Parliament and to this country.
Yeah.
So what you said, absolutely true.
Yeah.
Not going to be easy.
No. But again, the energy and the guys, he's a Trump-type politician. I mean, very dynamic. He's not afraid to go after people. So we'll see. I think you're seeing across Europe, a movement to much more nationalistic, aggressive kinds of parties in France and Austria and Germany. These right-wing parties are gaining support. And, of course, it gets pretty frightening when you got the right-wing parties in Germany gaining support. I mean, those guys are scary for good reason. But nonetheless, it's there. And so I think the leaders in these countries have got to move toward more constructive leadership positions.
There's one thing that seems to complicate what Boris Johnson wants is what they call the Irish border backstop,
right?
Which is a plan to keep what they call a seamless border on Ireland in the event that the UK leaves the EU, in the event that England leaves the European Union, without securing a complete deal.
Right, because Ireland, I guess, well, they are part of the European Union, and they don't want to be stuck there with a tough border situation. But I listened to Boris Johnson the other night, and he said, the backstop goes if doesn't make any difference. We're pulling out, backstop or no backstop. So, and I think, I think he'd be willing to come up with some sort of deal on that. I certainly hope they do. We don't need a situation blowing up over there like we've had for years and years and years.
Yeah, that complicates it because the northern border between North and Southern Ireland is a big part of the deal too, and yeah.
Right. Well, we'll give him a little time here, Brian, and see how it
works
goes.
out for Boris. Well, Doc, that's all I got this week. Did you have anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, I think we have some debates coming up here shortly again.
Biden says he's taking the gloves off. What do you make of that?
Well, I don't know. It might pump up the Nielsen ratings a little bit there. I don't know. Certainly, there are plenty of vulnerabilities. I think the opponents have, and he's got. He may well go after some of them.
What's your ultimate prediction as far as who will the Democrat nominee be and who will win in 2020?
I'm still looking at Cuomo.
Really?
Yeah.
You think he'll jump in?
I think he's pretty well positioned. Yeah. Now, whether I think a lot depends on what happens to Biden. But
you think he'd be a much more palatable choice for the American people since the advent of the Squad and their politics?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. But again, Cuomo could run as the so-called favored son candidate. So the New York delegation would just put him forward as their favorite son, and then you go into a convention that's a total chaos. No, I'm not. I would not discount him.
That's an interesting prediction. I'll have to ask Sean Hogan about that next time Hogan's on.
I'm not saying it's a. Well, I guess it's an interesting prediction.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call it all that infallible, but.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Doc, always good at talking to you.
Well, thank you, Brian. I appreciate your support, and perhaps we can talk again.